let's get back to the Alberta campaign and the UCP's second majority win last night. Joining us right now is Jen Gerson, columnist and founder of The Line, and Rick Bell, columnist for the Calgary Sun. Nice to see both of you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Rick, I'll get you to start us out here. Because it seems like Danielle Smith convinced Albertans not to be concerned about her leadership, which the NDP wanted to do.
Right. The brand is the United Conservative brand is very strong. The party was created to make sure there weren't close elections. And I think it was a long walk for a lot of people to go from a United Conservative Party to an NDP, no matter how much they wanted to either demonize Danielle Smith, rightly or wrongly, or appear more centrist than they have in the past. So I think people did come home and they just didn't get enough of those so-called reluctant UCPers.
And Jen, what do you make of that? Was that too long of a walk? Was it an ideological divide, or was it the very fact that the UCP, or rather the NDP, focused on leadership more rather than perhaps promises?
I think Rick is probably correct here. I think that Notley and the NDP might have convinced a significant portion of those reluctant UCPers to attempt the NDP if they had run a stronger campaign. But bluntly, the NDP ran a twofold campaign. One is Danielle is not trustworthy, and on top of that, they didn't really have a lot in the way of vision in their own strategy or approach. I mean, I think probably the hallmark suggestion coming from her camp, the most obvious, most visible one, was a small corporate tax increase. That's not playing to any strength. That's in fact playing to their weakness. It's not enough of a lure for people who would be tribally or ideologically associated with the Conservative brand. And also keep in mind that for a lot of people, the NDP is associated, rightly or wrongly, with the economic bust that followed to the 2014 oil crash. A lot of people still blame the NDP for a very dark time in their lives and for a period of low employment.
So, listening to this, Rick, I'm wondering, was this a victory for the UCP as a party, or was this a victory for Danielle Smith?
Well, it's definitely a victory for the party. I saw that she's called it the miracle on the prairies. Well, it wasn't a miracle. I mean, most people were predicting, including myself, that she would win. I think she sees it as a big victory because I think in her mind she sees herself as being put upon, as being under constant attack, as being an object of derision, of ridicule, because the stories that came out during the campaign about things she said in the past and videos and candidates that made certain remarks that people found incredible, and an ethics commissioner report that found her guilty of breaking the conflicts of interest law. So I think she sees it as a big victory. I always thought that Alberta being Alberta, yes, it's changed somewhat in the 30 plus years I've been here, but it was always going to be a very, very steep climb, a hard slog for the NDP to win. And a testament of that is the fact that they won many seats in Calgary, and still it wasn't enough. And again, I just don't think that whole Danielle Smith is crazy, is unpredictable, is risky. Really, it did click with some people because you saw the results in Calgary go down. There are many defeats in Calgary.
And Rick, I would agree with you for the most part here, but let's also put this into perspective. A 49-seat majority is not an overwhelming majority. Right. The popular vote is actually strikingly even between the two parties. There's not a huge gap in the terms of the popular vote. And I think I've seen some graphs from Trevor Tombe that suggest that, in fact, if 2,000 votes had gone other ways in select ridings, this would be an NDP majority. So I don't think that I agree with you that this was a very, very tough map for the NDP. The NDP needed to flip almost 20 seats right? And that's hard for any party to do in any circumstance. It's certainly going to be hard for a progressive party to do in Alberta when the Treasury is flush with resource cash and the economy is doing really well. The economic conditions absolutely favored an incumbent. In fact, if they had a less controversial leader at the helm of the party, they would be looking at a 60 to 70 seat majority. So I do think that Danielle Smith did concern a lot of people. But what this election actually did is it killed the Alberta Party and it killed the Liberal Party. It killed a lot of these sorts of increasingly fringe vanity parties and convinced a lot of those people that really it was time to stop playing around and start supporting the NDP as the progressive and the center-left choice for them. What the NDP did fail to do is that it didn't convince the reluctant UCP voters, which is the people who they actually need to bring over if they're going to form government.
Yeah,
and if I could just jump in here for a second. In October of last year, I've got the column over on the side here, and it was an interview with Danielle right after she won the leadership, talking about how do you think you'll win the next election? And she said, hold as many of my 39 seats outside the two big cities and win between 10 and 15 in Calgary. So, and she did.
Can I ask, though, because, you do have essentially this urban-rural divide, though, because you now have a UCP caucus, which is dominated by rural Alberta. How does that affect the government going forward? No representation in Edmonton, lost seats in Calgary. How does that affect the kind of government we're going to see? Jen, I'll get you to start there.
I think Danielle Smith is going to either be a generational premier, or she's going to flame out spectacularly and hard. And it's a min-max scenario. I don't know what the answer of this is going to be. But if she is going to be a once-in-a-generation premier, Ralph Klein-esque, then what she is going to need to do is she's going to need to surround herself with a real diversity of viewpoints. And she's going to need to surround herself with a lot of really great, smart advisors who make sure that some of her informational hygiene problems are adjusted for, that she feels like she's getting a good representation of what people across the province, especially in the cities, are feeling. Because where people in the cities align is not where people in rural Alberta align. Where people in downtown Calgary are going to align is a lot closer to where they would align with any other downtown populace. And that means that, for example, a lot of the COVID measures that she was railing against during COVID, for example, would not have sold in Calgary or Edmonton. She came to power at a fairly fortuitous time in that regard. So, I think that if she can surround herself with a couple of people who have at least a bead on what typical Calgarian urbanites or typical Alberta urbanites feel on issues, she is going to be well served by that. But if she is surrounding herself with extremely like-minded people from rural Alberta and solely from rural Alberta at her cabinet table, I think the risk is that she is going to propose policies that don't actually have the support that she thinks that they do.
Rick, what would you say?
Exactly, and I think what she has to do is she always talks about Ralph Klein. Well, I covered Ralph Klein. I hung out with Ralph Klein to some degree and definitely drank with him on a few occasions. Ralph Klein always made it clear that you're not always going to get what you want. Everybody's going to have to put a little bit of water in their wine. And I think the group that Danielle Smith has to tell that story to and read that riot act to are some of the people like the so-called Take Back Alberta and other people sympathetic to that. She has to tell them, we have to be a big tent, mainstream, moderate conservative party, which means you will get far more from me than you'd get from the NDP, but you are not going to get everything. It was interesting at her party on the Stampede grounds yesterday. It was her attack on Trudeau that got the crowd yelling, Danielle, Danielle, Danielle. It was the attack on Trudeau because most of the crowd that was there, at least when I came in near the end, were the people who were also strong supporters when she ran for UCP leader. She now has to tell those people, you don't get everything you want. Full stop.
Okay, listen, quickly losing time, but I do need to ask this of each of you. Now that Danielle Smith has won, what does that mean for provincial-federal relations? Quickly to each of you.
Oh, I mean, I think that she is going to have the easiest time managing her caucus domestically when she's fighting Ottawa. So expect her to fight on everything, tooth and nail. Just transition, natural gas, she mentioned that during her speech, any kind of green policy. You were going to get screaming, wailing, and court challenges all the way down.
Okay, Rick?
You're going to hear a lot from Danielle Smith. Be prepared. Even as far away from Calgary as Ottawa is, you're going to hear from her, because when in doubt, and this is true of other Alberta leaders, when your back's against the wall, there's always Ottawa to bash, and bash hard.
Okay.
And she knows that. Her base loves it. The red meat will be served up, and you'll be there in Ottawa to be able to sit down and enjoy the menu.
Well, I'll invite the both of you. But for now, thank you for that. Rick Bell, Jen Gerson, thank you for the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.